Hi, I'm Pastor Sharo, and welcome to the PG Insider Freebie. So, I must admit that coming up with the 10 most important things my dad ever taught me as a minister was very difficult. It was an almost insurmountable task because in 44 years of life, he has taught me so much. I've been blessed to have so many people, especially my mom, my dad, and my godmother, that have shaped the minister that I am today. But these 10 things are the things that I think I've used most frequently over the last 30 years of ministry, and they came from my dad. So if you're ready, let's get rolling. So the first thing I want to share with you that I learned from my dad that I have kept forever is give it everything. I know it sounds elementary, it sounds too basic, and you're like, I know that already. But you'd be surprised how 99% of the time we just have commit. Give it everything means to be fully immersed, fully present. If you're going to do something, whether it's ministry, it's business, it's leadership of any type, put everything you have into it. I saw my dad write plays when I was a little girl. My first play, I was 3 years old, and he wrote it, but he wrote music, he wrote dance, he wrote the lyrics to everything, everybody's parts, made the costumes. He always puts 100% of himself into every project, and that's the first and most important thing that has taken me through ministry. Number 2. He always said to me, you can do this. I remember when I was a little girl driving by the president's house in Port of Spain in Trinidad. And he would point it out to me and he would say, look. And as I looked, he would always say this. I don't know if he remembers, but he said, you know, one day you can live there. Well, at that time, a woman was never the president of Trinidad and Tobago. A woman was never the sole resident of that house. But even then, he made me feel like if I wanted to, I could literally live in that house as the president of a country. You don't understand what feeling like that as a little girl does. It makes you feel like you can do anything. Mediocrity sucks. Oops, I'm a pastor. I don't say that word. Mediocrity makes you miserable. If you're going to do it halfway, don't do it. Mediocre is not who you're called to be. Whatever it is that God has put in your spirit, you can do this. That's number 2. Number 3 is one of my favorite lessons that I learned from him, and I think it has helped me to keep the joy in my life. And it is this. It's okay to love shoes. I know you're surprised. You thought my mom taught me that. No, my daddy taught me that. I love shoes. He loves shoes. My brother loves shoes. And that's okay. Sometimes we're in ministry, when you're in ministry, you feel like to love anything that is not in the word, of the word, around the word, for the word, as long as it's not written in the Bible, then you can't love it. Well, I always say the Bible say how beautiful on the mountain are the feet of them who bring good news, and great shoes make those beautiful feet look even better. My dad taught me that if I love shoes, that's okay. You can still be an awesome preacher, a great woman of God, and a faithful Christian and love shoes. What does that mean, and how does that translate to your life? Friends, it's okay to be happy. Being a preacher doesn't mean you have to be miserable all the time. You don't have to be an old grump, and you don't have to be super serious about everything and speak in a big boy voice all the time. It's okay to love something. It's okay to be fond of something and collect something. A little bit of luxury will not take you to hell. 4, he taught me not to be intimidated by spirit or man. I was a little girl and got to see him cast out demons from people. In fact, a great portion of his church are people who were delivered from demonic spirits. And he showed me how not to be intimidated by big demons, small demons, or any kind of demon in between, by many, by few, by one. We are given a power through our God that is greater in us than he that is in the world. So he always taught me. I watched him and I learned how not to be intimidated by spirits but also not to be intimidated by people. When my dad first started preaching, he wasn't a very educated man. He's brilliant, but he didn't have a college degree. But yet I would see him stand up and speak to people with PhDs and multi-billion-dollar companies, and they all were enthralled and listened to him. And he was never scared or embarrassed about it, or if he was, you didn't know, because he knew the importance of the message. So he taught me how not to be intimidated by humans, and certainly not by spirits. 5, probably the most significant thing, and I put it in the middle because it can go either way for anybody. I learned this from my dad, and it is forgive fast. Forgive fast. In ministry, there will be a million times when you will need to express and demonstrate forgiveness. You will be hurt, you'll be misunderstood, you'll be judged, you'll be criticized, and it would be easy for bitterness to well up in your soul. I've heard preachers say, if I could do anything else, I would, or I hate this life, or God, why did you put this burden on me? But when you hold people in your soul, and bitterness and unforgiveness takes root, especially if they've hurt you or your family, talked about your church, talked about your work, and really hurt you in a deep place, sometimes you hold on to that. And that is crippling. I've seen my dad go through the worst of things and then see the same people at whose hands he suffered and welcome them back. And when they came crying to him, he didn't say, well, I remember what you did. He always forgave. And at first I used to think, why is he so, weak towards that person? But as I grew up, I realized what an awesome and freeing lesson it is to forgive fast. I love that. It's not always easy, but it sure liberates you. The 6th thing I want to share with you that my dad has taught me was to enjoy life in the kingdom, especially through loving people. Ever since I can remember, my very first Christmas that I can remember, the one memory that sticks with me and has stuck with me for 44 years is how my dad does Christmas. Every year, he sits on the stage with toys, and the children of his community line up, and he hands every child a toy. And now I'm a grown woman. I'm 44 years old, and I still do the same thing. I send toys to children all over this world, even in my own city too, because I saw him do that. Why? Because he makes them happy? Not always. It's because they make us happy. Giving to them puts a joy in my spirit that while it uplifts the kingdom, it blesses other people. It's not enough to say you love people when you do nothing about it. And I know a lot of people say, well, people need food and people need clothing. Why would you give children toys? I'll tell you why. Because I can feed a child and I can give them, chicken and rice, or I can give them roti if you're from Trinidad. But when I give a child a toy, the smile that it puts on their face lasts longer than a meal. And yes, we'll feed them too. But I certainly remember when somebody I didn't know brought me a doll. And I remember how treasured it was. And I'm grown, but I still appreciate that somebody did that for me, and that's what I want to do to somebody else. Number 7, be committed. Don't give up so fast. When my dad first went to preach where his church is, there were people there who told him, you couldn't open a Christian church in a non-Christian community. And they said, many have tried and many have failed. You need to leave. But I saw him day after day go there anyway. I saw him in the rain, in the sunshine, in the mud. They bulldozed his church down. They threw rotten eggs at him, but it never stopped him. He still pursued what God called him to do, always 100% committed. And so when it came my turn to come to a city with nobody to help, just like maybe you're there right now, you want to do something and you have no support. You have nobody who's got you, you have no resources, and you think you're not going to make it. I'm here to tell you that the most important thing he ever taught me was keep doing it. Keep trying, even when you don't see results, even when it feels so hopeless and you've done it over and over and it feels like nobody's paying attention. Stay committed. Stay committed to what you know is true and is your truth. So the 8th piece of advice I'd like to share with you from my dad is understand what joy looks like to you. He might not have used those words, but he did share that very valuable information with me. When I began in ministry, especially pastoral ministry, moving from one country to the next, I was really accosted by a lot of people who made sure I understood that I didn't understand the culture. You know, I even had one person tell me point blank in the face, you don't know our people, you don't be telling my kid what to do. When things like that happen, you can do one of two things. You can stand up for who you are, or you could begin to assimilate into the culture that you're living in. And I was always of the impression that you don't go try to change people into yourself. What my dad said though is that it's so important that even while you become assimilated into a culture, you know what your own joy looks like. If you like puzzles, then do your puzzles. Not just because everybody in your circle is into that one preacher or into that one revelation, you got to follow the bandwagon. Know your own joy. If you love having a parade, if you love doing a Christmas tree, if you love 40-foot banana splits, then know what it is that the Lord put in you that makes you happy, and do that for the kingdom. 9. My dad always encouraged me to take action. I was 13 years old when I became the youth pastor of his church. I don't know, some people might say that was reckless. Other people can see the value of what he saw in me when I didn't see it myself. He could have at any minute said, well, 1, that's a male occupation. 2, you're way too young. 3, you're 13. How are you going to lead a youth group? Everybody's going to be older than you. But not once did he discourage me. If I had a vision, his advice was always, take action, do something. I was leading the choir. We had about 100 teenagers in our youth group, every one of them older than I was. But he never discouraged me. When I said I want to go into a singing competition with my choir, he's like, let's do it, take action. Oh, I want to write a play, let's do it. I want to start a dance company, let's do it. It was not enough to just talk about it. If you want to do it, take action, do something. And the 10th thing that my dad has taught me that I would like to share with you is, once God has called you, no one can uncall you. When you're a female and you're in an industry or in a ministry that prefers or is accustomed to males, then you'll be faced with all kinds of opposition. You know, I remember being a young girl or hearing that girls aren't supposed to be pastors, and even in seminary and in Bible school and in internship, I heard people say that you can preach, you just can't pastor. But my dad taught me something very different. You see, his pastor was also a female. My godmother, Pastor Samde Jury, has always been female. So my dad was saved under the ministry of a woman. And so when I felt the call to preach the gospel, he did nothing but encourage me. And even though people said, well, you couldn't be called to pastor because women can't pastor, he would also always say, men can't call you. When God calls you, no one can uncall you. And that's something that I want to share and encourage you with, because whenever I feel like, Lord, am I really supposed to be doing this? Or Lord, what if what they're saying is true? There are men who spend their whole lives on YouTube from their pulpits preaching against women in ministry, when there's so much more other important things that they should be focusing on. But girl, if you're called to preach and if you're called to pastor, if God called you, no one can uncall you. I hope you've enjoyed these 10 tips and the 10 most important things in ministry that I remember from my dad's teaching. Don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel and to the podcast, and that way you'll never miss any of our upcoming content. I love you, and God bless you. I'll see you soon.